At a busy international airport, the energy was buzzing with travelers rushing to catch their flights. Families with kids in tow, business people glued to their phones, and tourists dragging oversized luggage filled the terminal. Among the crowd, a well-dressed family stood out, not because they were flashy, but because they carried themselves with quiet confidence. The father, a tall man with a warm smile, held the hand of his youngest child while his wife guided their older kid toward the gate. They looked like any other first-class passengers ready for a smooth journey. The flight crew was already on board, preparing for the long-haul trip. One of the flight attendants, a young woman eager to prove herself, moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency. Her name tag read Alex, and she had been working hard to climb the ranks in her career. She prided herself on following rules to the letter, believing that strict adherence to protocol would earn her recognition from her superiors. Little did she know this day would test more than just her professionalism. It would challenge her ability to see beyond surface-level judgments. As boarding continued, the family made their way onto the plane. The father greeted Alex politely when she welcomed him aboard, but there was something about their presence that caught her attention. Maybe it was the expensive watch peeking out from under his sleeve, or the calm authority in his voice as he spoke to his wife. Whatever it was, Alex felt an inexplicable urge to scrutinize them further, and then she noticed it. The carry-on bag tucked neatly above their seats seemed slightly larger than what airline regulations allowed. Now, most people might have let it slide. After all, bags often stretched the limits of size restrictions without causing issues. But Alex wasn't most people. Determined to enforce the rules, she approached the family with a clipboard in hand. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "I'm afraid your bag exceeds our size limit for overhead storage. It'll need to be checked." The father blinked, surprised by the interruption. He glanced at the bag before turning back to Alex. "Oh, I understand," he replied calmly, "but this contains fragile medical equipment for my son. Checking it could damage it, and we really can't risk that." His explanation sounded reasonable enough, but Alex hesitated. To her, it felt like an excuse, a way to bend the rules because of privilege. After all, hadn't she seen countless other passengers comply without complaint? Why should these folks be any different? "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice tightening slightly. "But policy is policy. If you'd like, I can assist you in checking it safely." The tension between them grew palpable. The father's expression shifted from polite concern to frustration. "Look, I get that you're just doing your job," he said, his tone firmer now. "But sometimes policies need flexibility. This isn't about convenience, it's about my child's health." By now, nearby passengers had started glancing over, curious about the exchange. Some whispered to each other, speculating about what was happening. The mother tried to defuse the situation, gently reminding her husband to stay calm for the sake of the kids. But Alex, feeling increasingly defensive, dug her heels in. In her mind, backing down would mean admitting weakness, and she couldn't afford that, not in front of everyone watching. "I'm sorry, but if the bag doesn't meet the requirements, it needs to go," Alex insisted, crossing her arms. "Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave the aircraft." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the father exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Fine," he said, his voice low but laced with disbelief. "We'll go, but trust me, this isn't over." With that, the family gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark. As they walked down the aisle, the father's jaw was clenched, his earlier warmth replaced by simmering anger. His wife shot Alex a look that said more than words ever could, and their children looked confused, sensing the tension around them. Other passengers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to applaud Alex's strictness or sympathize with the family's plight. What Alex didn't realize, and what none of the passengers could have guessed, was that this seemingly ordinary traveler wasn't just another passenger. He happened to own the very airline they were flying with. Not that anyone knew it at the time. He preferred to keep such details private, focusing instead on running his business with integrity and care. But as the family stepped off the plane, leaving behind a trail of murmurs and side-eye glances, one thing was certain. This incident wouldn't end quietly. For Alex, the encounter felt like a victory, a small win against someone who thought they were above the rules. But deep down, a nagging doubt lingered. Had she gone too far? Was sticking to policy worth alienating customers? Those questions would haunt her later, especially once the truth came to light. For now, though, the plane taxied away from the gate, leaving behind a story that was only beginning to unfold. As the family stepped off the plane, the weight of the situation hit them hard. The father clenched his fists, trying to keep his emotions in check, but it was clear he was seething inside. His wife, on the other hand, couldn't hold back her frustration any longer. Her face flushed with anger as she turned to confront the flight attendant one last time before they left the aircraft. "You had no right to humiliate us like this," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and indignation. "We're paying customers, not criminals. Do you even realize how unnecessary this was?" The flight attendant, still convinced she'd done the right thing, stood her ground, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "I'm just following company policy," she replied, her tone defensive. "If everyone ignored the rules, we'd have chaos." "Policy?" the mother shot back, her voice rising slightly. "What about common sense? What about treating people with basic respect? My husband explained why that bag couldn't be checked. It has fragile medical equipment for our son. Was it worth risking his health over some size limit?" Her words hung heavy in the air, drawing stares from nearby passengers who were still lingering near the gate. Some nodded sympathetically, while others whispered among themselves, clearly divided on whose side to take. A few even pulled out their phones, capturing snippets of the confrontation. In today's world, moments like these often ended up online, where public opinion could sway wildly depending on how the story was told. The father placed a calming hand on his wife's shoulder, signaling her to stop. He didn't want to escalate things further, not in front of their kids who were already wide-eyed and confused. Instead, he knelt down to their level, offering reassuring smiles despite the storm brewing inside him. "It's okay," he told them softly. "We'll figure this out together. Let's go find another way home." With that, the family walked away, leaving behind a tense silence. Passengers exchanged glances, unsure whether to applaud the flight attendant's strictness or criticize her lack of empathy. One elderly woman shook her head disapprovingly, muttering under her breath, "Some rules are meant to be bent." Meanwhile, a businessman leaned over to his seatmate and said, "She was just doing her job, though. You can't blame her for enforcing the rules." But what none of them knew, and what the flight attendant herself wouldn't discover until much later, was that the man she'd kicked off the plane wasn't just an ordinary traveler. He happened to own the airline they were flying with. This wasn't just a case of bad customer service, it was a PR nightmare waiting to happen. Back at the gate, the flight attendant tried to shake off the encounter. She told herself she'd done nothing wrong, that sticking to the rules was always the right choice. But as she returned to her duties, something gnawed at her. Maybe it was the look in the mother's eyes when she spoke about her son's medical needs. Or maybe it was the way the father had calmly accepted defeat, his dignity intact even as he walked away. Whatever it was, it left her feeling uneasy. Meanwhile, the family made their way through the terminal, searching for answers. They approached the airline's customer service desk, hoping to resolve the issue quickly. The father explained the situation to the representative, emphasizing the importance of the medical equipment and expressing his disappointment with how they'd been treated. To his surprise, the representative seemed unusually nervous, almost apologetic, as if sensing that something bigger was at play. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience," the representative stammered, glancing repeatedly at the father's face. "Let me see what I can do to get you rebooked on the next available flight." While waiting, the father pulled out his phone and dialed a number. On the other end of the line, a senior executive answered immediately. "Yes, sir?" the executive asked, recognizing the caller ID. "Is everything all right?" "No," the father replied, his tone measured but firm. "Everything is not all right. I need you to listen carefully because we have a serious problem on our hands." He recounted the entire incident, sparing no detail. By the time he finished, the executive was speechless. "Sir, I don't know what to say. This is unacceptable. I'll handle it personally. Hanging up, the father exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of anger and determination. He hadn't wanted to pull rank, but sometimes drastic measures were necessary to ensure accountability. As he looked around at his family, his wife comforting their youngest child, his older kids scrolling distractedly on a tablet, he reminded himself why he'd built the airline in the first place. It wasn't just about profits or prestige. It was about creating experiences that brought people joy, comfort, and peace of mind. And yet, here they were, victims of the very system he'd worked so hard to perfect. By now, news of the incident had reached the airline's headquarters. Executives scrambled to contain the fallout, knowing full well that stories like this spread faster than wildfire in the age of social media. Calls were made, emails sent, and emergency meetings scheduled. The flight attendant, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes, continued her work, oblivious to the fact that her actions had set off a chain reaction that would change her life forever. For the family, however, the ordeal was far from over. Rebooking took longer than expected thanks to a string of delays and miscommunications. Tempers flared again when they learned their original seats had been given away to standby passengers. The father, usually patient and composed, found himself snapping at another representative, his frustration boiling over. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to his wife. "They're treating us like strangers instead of valued customers." Finally, after what felt like hours, they were assigned new seats on a later flight. Exhausted but relieved, they boarded the plane, settling into their upgraded business-class seats, a small gesture of goodwill from the airline, though it did little to mend the damage already done. As the plane took off, the father stared out the window, lost in thought. He knew this wasn't just about one bad experience. It was a symptom of deeper issues within the organization he'd poured his heart into building. And somewhere below, at the same airport, the flight attendant wrapped up her shift, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Back at the airline's headquarters, the news of what had happened spread like wildfire. The senior executives were in a frenzy, huddled in an emergency meeting room with laptops open and phones buzzing nonstop. Emails flew back and forth as they tried to piece together exactly how such a high-profile passenger had been treated so poorly. No one needed to spell it out. This wasn't just any customer. It was the man who owned the airline. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The father, still fuming from the day's events, had made his feelings abundantly clear during his call with the executive earlier. He didn't mince words. "This isn't just about me or my family," he said firmly. "It's about the standards we claim to uphold as a company. If this is how we treat our passengers, even the ones who don't own the airline, then we've got a serious problem on our hands." His words hit hard. The executives knew he was right. This wasn't just a PR issue. It was a reflection of deeper cracks in the system. How could they market themselves as a premium airline focused on customer care when their own staff was alienating people? Worse yet, how could they explain this to the public without coming across as tone-deaf or defensive? One of the executives leaned forward, rubbing his temples. "We need to act fast," he said, his voice tense. "If this gets out, and let's be honest, it probably will, we'll look incompetent at best and discriminatory at worst." Another chimed in. "What about the flight attendant? Should we terminate her?" The room fell silent for a moment. Firing someone might seem like the easiest solution, but it wouldn't fix the root cause of the problem. Besides, the father had specifically requested that no one lose their job over this. "He wants accountability, not punishment," the first executive reminded them. "But that doesn't mean she walks away unscathed. We need to turn this into a learning opportunity for her and for everyone else." As the executives hashed out a plan, the flight attendant finished her shift, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding behind the scenes. She clocked out, grabbed her bag, and headed home, replaying the day's events in her mind. Sure, things had gotten heated with that family, but she convinced herself she'd done the right thing. Rules were rules, after all. What else was she supposed to do? When she arrived home, she flopped onto the couch and scrolled through her phone, half-heartedly, checking social media. That's when she saw it. a post from someone who'd witnessed the confrontation at the gate. The caption read, "Flight attendant kicks family off plane over carry-on size limit. Guess who owns the airline?" Below it, hundreds of comments poured in, ranging from outrage to mockery. Some defended her actions, saying she was simply enforcing policy, while others called her behavior cold and unprofessional. Her heart sank as she scrolled further. Someone had even tagged the airline's official account, demanding answers. Panic set in as she realized the story was gaining traction online. People were taking sides, debating whether she was justified or out of line. And then, buried among the replies, she spotted a comment that stopped her cold. "FYI, the guy they kicked off owns the whole airline." Her stomach churned. For a moment, she thought it was a joke, a cruel prank meant to rattle her. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Everything clicked into place. The nervousness of the customer service reps, the way the family carried themselves. With quiet authority, the vague sense that she'd missed something important. It all made sense now. She sat there frozen, staring at her phone as the reality of the situation crashed over her. She hadn't just enforced a rule, she'd humiliated the owner of the airline in front of dozens of passengers. Her face burned with shame and her mind raced with questions. Would she lose her job? Could she ever recover from this? What must the family think of her now? The next morning she reported to work, dreading what awaited her. As soon as she walked into the break room, whispers followed her. Her coworkers avoided eye contact and the usual chatter faded into awkward silence. When her supervisor called her into a private office, she braced herself for the worst. "Take a seat," the supervisor said, closing the door behind them. The flight attendant perched nervously on the edge of the chair, clutching her hands together. "There's no easy way to say this," the supervisor began, "but you're aware of the incident yesterday, correct?" She nodded mutely, unable to meet their gaze. "The passenger you asked to leave the plane, well, he's more than just a regular traveler. He's the majority shareholder of this airline." The words landed like a punch to the gut. She swallowed, hard, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. I didn't know," she stammered. "I swear I thought I was doing my job." "I believe you," the supervisor replied gently. "But unfortunately, good intentions aren't enough. This has become a major issue, not just for you, but for the entire company. We're working on damage control, but we also need to address what happened here." For the next hour, the supervisor explained the steps being taken. While termination was off the table, at least for now, she would be required to undergo extensive training in customer service and cultural sensitivity. Additionally, she'd be reassigned to work directly under the owner for a probationary period, assisting him on high-profile flights and learning firsthand about the values he wanted to instill in the airline. "It's not going to be easy," the supervisor warned. "You'll have to prove yourself again. Not just to us, but to the public. Are you ready for that?" Tears streaming down her face, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." Later that day, word of her reassignment reached the father. He listened quietly as his team briefed him on the details, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the desk. "Good," he said finally. "Let's give her a chance to grow. Mistakes happen, but it's how we handle them that defines us." Deep down, he hoped this experience would teach her, and the rest of the company, a valuable lesson. Compassion and flexibility weren't weaknesses, they were strengths. And if his airline was going to succeed, it needed to reflect those principles in every interaction, big or small. Meanwhile, the flight attendant spent the rest of the day grappling with her emotions. She felt embarrassed, humiliated, and terrified, but also oddly determined. This was her chance to make things right, not just for herself, but for the passengers she served. As daunting as the road ahead seemed, she resolved to face it head-on. After all, she reminded herself, everyone deserved a second chance, even her. The days following the incident were a whirlwind for the flight attendant. Her world had been turned upside down, and every waking moment was consumed by a mix of guilt, fear, and determination to make things right. She couldn't shake the image of the family walking off the plane, The father's calm but piercing gaze, the mother's fiery words, and the confused looks on their children's faces. It replayed in her mind like a broken record, each loop amplifying her regret. Her reassignment began almost immediately. Instead of working regular flights, she was now tasked with assisting directly under the owner of the airline. At first, the idea terrified her. How could she possibly face him after what had happened? Would he treat her coldly or dismiss her entirely? But as it turned out, his approach was far more nuanced and challenging than she'd anticipated. Their first meeting took place in a quiet conference room at headquarters. The atmosphere was tense, though not because of hostility. The owner walked in carrying a folder filled with documents and set it down on the table. He didn't waste time with small talk. "I want to be clear about something," he began, his tone measured but firm. "This isn't about punishing you. It's about teaching you and everyone else here what it means to truly serve our passengers." He opened the folder and slid a sheet of paper toward her. On it was a list of high-profile flights she would assist with over the next few months. These weren't ordinary trips. They included VIP charters, corporate events, and even charity missions aimed at underserved communities. Each flight came with its own unique challenges requiring top-notch service and attention to detail. "This is your chance to learn," he continued. "You'll see firsthand how decisions are made, how we handle difficult situations, and why empathy matters, just as much as policy. I expect nothing less than your best effort." She nodded, swallowing hard. His words carried weight, not just because of who he was, but because of the sincerity behind them. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was an opportunity to grow in ways she hadn't imagined. The training sessions that followed were intense. They covered everything from customer psychology to conflict resolution, with role-playing exercises designed to simulate real-life scenarios. For the first time, she realized how much nuance existed in the seemingly simple act of serving passengers. It wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about understanding people, their needs, emotions, and circumstances. One particular session stood out. A trainer posed a hypothetical situation. A passenger refuses to stow their bag properly because it contains medication critical to their health. What do you do? As the flight attendant listened to others' responses, she felt a pang of recognition. This was exactly what had happened with the family on that fateful day. Listening to different perspectives helped her see where she'd gone wrong. There were always alternatives, creative solutions that balanced policy with compassion. Outside of training, she accompanied the owner on several flights, observing his interactions with passengers and crew. He had a way of making everyone feel valued, whether it was a nervous traveler flying for the first time or a seasoned executive accustomed to luxury. He greeted each person warmly, asked thoughtful questions, and remembered details like names and preferences. It wasn't just professionalism, it was genuine care. During one flight, a young boy traveling alone became visibly anxious during takeoff. While other attendants focused on routine tasks, the owner knelt beside the child, offering reassurance and distracting him with stories until he relaxed. Watching this exchange left a deep impression on her. She realized that being a leader wasn't just about authority, it was about connection. As weeks passed, the flight attendant began to notice subtle changes within herself. She started paying closer attention to passengers' body language and tone of voice, picking up on cues she'd previously overlooked. When disagreements arose, she found herself pausing before reacting, asking questions instead of jumping to conclusions. Slowly but surely, she was learning to see beyond the surface. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Passengers began complimenting her service, praising her attentiveness and kindness. Coworkers, too, noticed the shift. One veteran flight attendant pulled her aside after a particularly smooth flight and said, "You've really grown these past few weeks. Keep it up." Encouraged by the positive feedback, she threw herself into her work with renewed purpose. She volunteered for extra shifts, sought advice from mentors, and even started reading books on leadership and communication. Every day brought new lessons, and while the memory of that painful incident still lingered, it no longer weighed her down. Instead, it fueled her determination to improve. Meanwhile, the airline launched a major initiative called Skylux Cares, inspired by the owner's vision of creating a culture of empathy and inclusivity. The program included mandatory diversity training for all employees, revamped policies to allow for greater flexibility in exceptional cases, and community outreach programs aimed at supporting underprivileged youth interested in aviation careers. 2. Promote transparency. The owner recorded a heartfelt video message addressing the public. In it, he acknowledged the earlier incident, taking full responsibility for the shortcomings of his company. "We fell short of our values," he admitted. "But mistakes are opportunities to grow. That's why we're introducing Skylux Cares, to ensure that every passenger feels respected, valued, and cared for." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Customers praised his honesty and commitment to change, while industry experts hailed the initiative as a model for other airlines to follow. Social media lit up with supportive comments, many applauding the company's willingness to address its flaws head-on. For the flight attendant, watching the video was a turning point. Seeing the owner publicly embrace accountability reminded her of the importance of owning her own mistakes. If he could admit fault and strive for better, so could she. Determined to contribute to the initiative, she proposed ideas for improving onboard communication and resolving conflicts peacefully. Some of her suggestions were implemented, further boosting her confidence. By the end of her probationary period, she wasn't the same person who had boarded that ill-fated flight months earlier. She'd grown not only as a professional but also as a human being. The experience had humbled her, taught her resilience, and shown her the power of second chances. And as she prepared for her final assignment under the owner, a special charity, flight benefiting aspiring pilots from disadvantaged backgrounds, she felt a sense of pride she hadn't known before. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a calling. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she was ready to face it with grace, humility, and heart. The day of the charity flight arrived, and the atmosphere at the airport was electric. This wasn't an ordinary trip. It was a celebration of dreams taking flight, quite literally. The passengers included students from underprivileged backgrounds who had shown promise in aviation-related fields, along with mentors and sponsors eager to guide them toward brighter futures. For many of these young people, this was their first time on a plane, let alone attending such a high-profile event. Excitement buzzed through the terminal as they checked in, clutching boarding passes like prized tickets to another world. 4. The flight attendant. This assignment carried extra weight. It marked the culmination of months of hard work, reflection, and growth. She knew this flight would be her chance to prove not only to herself, but also to the owner and the entire company that she had truly changed. As she prepared for the journey, she felt a mix of nerves and determination bubbling inside her. This wasn't just about serving drinks or ensuring safety protocols were followed. It was about making a lasting impression, for the right reasons. When the passengers began boarding, she greeted each one with genuine warmth, going out of her way to make them feel welcome. One teenage girl hesitated near the door, looking overwhelmed by the size of the aircraft. Sensing her unease, the flight attendant approached her with a reassuring smile. "First time flying?" she asked softly. The girl nodded shyly. "Yeah, I've never been on a plane before." "Well, you're in for an adventure," the flight attendant replied, her voice brimming with encouragement. "And don't worry, we'll take good care of you. If you have any questions or need anything, just let me know." The girl's face relaxed into a tentative smile, and she stepped onto the plane with more confidence. Moments like these reminded the flight attendant why she'd chosen this career in the first place. Flying wasn't just about transportation. It was about creating experiences, fostering connections, and helping people see the world in new ways. As the flight got underway, the energy on board was infectious. Passengers laughed, shared stories, and marveled at the view outside the windows. The owner of the airline moved through the cabin, chatting with everyone and learning about their aspirations. When he reached the flight attendant, he paused, giving her a small nod of approval. "You're doing great," he said quietly. "Keep it up." Those simple words meant the world to her. They weren't just praise. They were validation that all her effort had paid off. Encouraged, she threw herself into her duties with even greater enthusiasm. She helped a nervous child fasten their seatbelt, handed out snacks with a smile, and answered countless questions from excited teenagers, curious about how planes worked. But the highlight of the flight came during a surprise announcement made by the owner over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice warm and inviting. "Today is a special day. Many of you are here because you've shown incredible potential, and we believe in your ability to soar, to reach heights you may not have thought possible. That's what this program is all about, giving talented individuals like yourselves the tools and opportunities to succeed." He went on to explain how the airline planned to support these aspiring aviators, offering scholarships, internships, and mentorship programs. The room erupted in applause and several students wiped away tears of gratitude. The flight attendant watched it all unfold, her heart swelling with pride. This was the kind of impact she wanted to be part of, moments that inspired hope and transformed lives. After landing, the group gathered for a photo on the tarmac, standing in front of the gleaming aircraft. The flight attendant joined them, feeling a deep sense of belonging. For so long, she'd seen herself as an outsider, someone who didn't quite measure up. But now she realized she was part of something bigger. This wasn't just a job. It was a mission to uplift others. In the weeks that followed, the effects of the charity flight rippled far beyond the runway. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting the airline's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Social media buzzed with positive reactions, and applications for the scholarship program poured in from across the country. The Skylux Cares initiative gained momentum, becoming a beacon of hope for aspiring professionals who might otherwise have been overlooked. For the flight attendant, life returned to a semblance of normalcy, though nothing felt quite the same anymore. Her perspective had shifted in profound ways. Where once she'd focused solely on following rules, she now prioritized understanding people. She found joy in small victories, helping a frazzled parent calm a crying baby, comforting a traveler afraid of turbulence, or simply sharing a kind word with someone having a tough day. Her colleagues noticed the change too. Gone was the rigid adherence to policy at all costs. In its place was a thoughtful, empathetic approach that earned her respect from both passengers and co-workers alike. During team meetings, she spoke up more often, offering insights based on her experiences and advocating for policies that balanced structure with flexibility. Her input was valued, and she became known as someone who could handle difficult situations with grace and wisdom. One evening, after a particularly challenging flight, she sat down with a cup of tea and reflected on how far she'd come. Just months ago, she'd been convinced her career was over, that one mistake had defined her forever. Now she saw it differently. That incident hadn't ruined her. It had reshaped her. It had forced her to confront her weaknesses, embrace humility, and strive for growth. And while she still carried the memory of that day, it no longer weighed her down. Instead, it served as a reminder of the power of second chances. The airline itself underwent a transformation during this time. Under the owner's leadership, the company doubled down on its commitment to excellence, not just in service, but in values. Employee training programs expanded to include modules on emotional intelligence and cultural awareness. Feedback mechanisms were introduced, allowing passengers to share their experiences openly and honestly. Senior management held regular town hall meetings, encouraging transparency and accountability at every level. Passenger satisfaction soared, and the airline's reputation reached new heights. People weren't just choosing Skylux for its comfort or convenience. They were choosing it because they trusted it. They knew that when they boarded one of its planes, they'd be treated with dignity and care, regardless of who they were or where they came from. As for the flight attendant, she continued to grow in her role, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. She enrolled in online courses to further her education, dreaming of someday becoming a trainer herself. Her ultimate goal? To teach others the lessons she'd learned about resilience, empathy, and the importance of seeing people as individuals rather than problems to solve. Looking back, she realized that the incident that had once seemed like the end of her career had actually been the beginning of something beautiful. It had taught her that mistakes, no matter how painful, could lead to growth if you were willing to learn. And it had shown her that even in moments of conflict there was always room for redemption. Little did she know, however, that her journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, still lessons to be learned, and still opportunities to make a difference. But for now, she was content knowing that she'd turned a dark chapter into a story of hope, a testament to the fact that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the brightest destinations. The months following the charity flight brought a wave of changes, not just for the flight attendant but for the entire airline. The Skylux Cares initiative had taken root, spreading its message of empathy and inclusivity across every corner of the organization. Employees at all levels were encouraged to share ideas on how to improve customer experiences, and many of those suggestions were implemented. From flexible policies for passengers with special needs to revamped training programs emphasizing emotional intelligence, the airline was evolving into something more than just a carrier. It was becoming a force for good. For the flight attendant, life settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. She still worked long hours, dealt with challenging situations, and faced the occasional difficult passenger, but now she approached everything with a different mindset. Every interaction became an opportunity to connect, to listen, and to make someone's day just a little bit brighter. Her colleagues often joked that she'd become the heart of their team, the one everyone turned to when tensions ran high or when a tricky situation needed diffusing. One evening, after a particularly grueling red-eye flight, she found herself sitting in the break room with a few coworkers. They were swapping stories about memorable passengers, some funny, some frustrating, and some downright inspiring. When it was her turn, she hesitated before speaking. "You know," she said slowly, "I used to think this job was all about following rules and keeping things running smoothly. But now I realize it's so much more than that. It's about people. Every single person who steps onto our plane has a story, even if we don't always get to hear it." Her words struck a chord, and the room fell silent for a moment. Then, one of her coworkers nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, you're right," he said. "And honestly, you've reminded us of that. Ever since everything happened, you've been showing us what it means to really care." She smiled, feeling a lump rise in her throat. For so long she'd carried the weight of that incident as a badge of shame. Now, it seemed, it had transformed into something else entirely. A lesson not just for her, but for those around her. Meanwhile, the owner of the airline continued to lead by example, ensuring that the values he championed weren't just empty slogans but lived realities. He made it a point to stay connected with employees, joining them on flights, attending training sessions, and hosting open forums where anyone could voice concerns or suggestions. His presence wasn't intimidating. Instead, it inspired trust and loyalty. People admired him not because of his title, but because of his humility and dedication to making things better. During one such forum, the flight attendant stood up to speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the microphone, but her voice was steady. "When I first started working here, I thought success meant never making mistakes," she admitted. "But I've learned that true success comes from learning from those mistakes and using them to grow. Thanks to the support I've received, I've been able to turn a bad experience into something positive, and I want to help others do the same." Her speech earned a standing ovation, and afterward several colleagues approached her to express their admiration. One young trainee, fresh out of aviation school, confided that hearing her story gave him hope. "I'm still figuring things out," he admitted. "But knowing that someone like you can bounce back from something so tough, it makes me believe I can handle whatever comes my way." Moments like these fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. She began mentoring newer employees, sharing her experiences and offering guidance whenever they struggled. Whether it was helping a rookie flight attendant navigate a difficult passenger or coaching ground staff on de-escalation techniques, she poured her energy into lifting others up. In doing so, she discovered a sense of fulfillment she'd never known before. As the year drew to a close, the airline held its annual awards ceremony, celebrating achievements big and small. The flight attendant attended reluctantly, unsure of what to expect. She hadn't sought recognition for her efforts. She simply wanted to do her job well. But when her name was called for the Employee of the Year award, she froze in disbelief. The owner stepped onto the stage to present the honor, his expression warm with pride. "This award goes to someone who embodies the spirit of Skylux Cares," he announced. "Someone who took a difficult moment and turned it into a journey of growth, not just for themselves but for everyone around them. Her resilience, compassion, and commitment to excellence have set a standard we should all aspire to." As the EE audience erupted into applause, she walked to the stage, her legs shaky but her heart full. Accepting the trophy, she took a deep breath before addressing the crowd. "Thank you," she began, her voice trembling. "But this isn't just my award. It belongs to all of us. We've worked together to create a culture where people feel valued, supported, and empowered to be their best selves. That's what truly matters." Her words resonated deeply, earning another round of cheers. Later that night, as she celebrated with her colleagues, she reflected on how far she'd come. What had once felt like the lowest point of her life had become the foundation for her greatest triumphs. She no longer saw herself as the woman who'd made a mistake. She saw herself as the woman who'd risen above it. In the years that followed, the airline thrived, earning accolades for its exceptional service and progressive policies. Passengers raved about their experiences, praising not just the comfort of the flights but the kindness of the staff. Behind the scenes, employees embraced the company's mission, knowing they played a vital role in shaping its future. As for the flight attendant, she eventually transitioned into a leadership role, overseeing training programs and mentoring the next generation of aviation professionals. Her journey served as a reminder that setbacks could be stepping stones if you had the courage to face them head-on. Looking back, she realized that the defining moments of her life hadn't been the ones where everything went perfectly. They'd been the moments where she stumbled, faltered, and chose to keep moving forward anyway. Those moments had taught her resilience, humility, and the power of second chances. And as she boarded yet another flight, ready to greet passengers with a smile and a helping hand, she knew one thing for certain. No matter where life took her, next she'd carry those lessons with her, for herself, for her passengers, and for the countless others whose paths she'd cross along the way.